Our next question comes from our friend Danny. Danny is a martial artist and also an actor. He's done BJJ and he's way into combat sports and martial arts now. He's 21 years old and he wants to know my opinion about what styles could work for acting. Okay. Now you probably have seen movie fu. That's that's the typical type of fight choreography we see in the movies. It's often based on big lateral movements like big hooks, big spinning kicks, things like that. And one of the reasons we see that so much in fight choreography and not as much, especially the big fancy 360 jumping spinning kicks, in real life is because it's easier to sell that stuff in a movie than, say, a straight jab, right? If I throw a straight punch, it's very difficult, especially, let's say I have a sideways angle, I'm framing the shot, we have two guys in front, here's the two guys, I'm going to punch you, no, I'm going to punch you. And then one of them throws a jab, right? It's hard to frame that shot without actually hitting the guy. But with a hook, now we have, let's say, I'm trying to line this up right. One guy's in front, one guy's behind, right? And the guy here, he throws a hook, and the guy behind, he reacts, right? He doesn't get hit. The punch doesn't come anywhere near his face. He reacts, right? I'm just twisting my head like that. And then they add a sound effect on top of it, or they get some celery and twist it around to make some crunching sounds. They do. Foley artistry is fascinating. Foley artistry is a huge part of what sells a technique on film. I've actually trained a number of actors, different types of actors and stuntmen. So I had a theater actor who was performing in a theater version of Fight Club. Yeah, Fight Club the play, not Fight Club the movie. And like the main character of Fight Club, he realized he'd never actually been in a fight. And he wanted to have a more authentic performance, so he came to my gym to train, to feel, what actual combat stress feels like, what it feels like to get punched, what it feels like to grapple. And he felt like that helped him to portray his character much better, right? I had a student, awesome guy, Anuj Singh Duhan. He's an actor and model from India. And I didn't know that at first. He came to my gym, and he was living in Shanghai doing some modeling work in Shanghai. And what's so interesting is how talented this guy was, how athletic this guy was. And I remember one day, we focused on grappling for about 4 months before I even knew what his objective was. Like, he wanted to learn all the fancy spinning kicks and stuff, but he didn't tell me that at first. He would just do everything I asked him to do, like, okay, today we're going to grapple. And one day, right before we rolled, he said, "Coach, can you show me all the submissions?" I said, there are lots of submissions. I mean, that would take a very long time. And he said, "Well, can you at least show me some of the major ones?" So I'm like, all right, I'm not going to break these down. I'm just going to show you them once. Like, here's a straight ankle lock, here's an arm bar, here's a kimura, here's a rear naked choke, here's this, here's that, here's the other. He was like, "Okay, I got it." I was like, "No, you don't. No, you don't. I mean, okay, you got it up here maybe, but you're going to forget that in a second." All right, about 30 minutes later, comes time for me to roll with him. And then he grabs my ankle and he goes for a straight ankle lock. I'm like, is he doing a straight ankle lock? And then he puts his hips into it. I'm like, he's doing a straight ankle lock. And I tap out. And I asked him, "Where did you learn that from?" And he says, "From you, coach. You just taught it to me." I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't happen in real life, man. That doesn't happen in real life. You can't just see a technique once and pick it up well enough to catch the coach in it. But man, this guy was on another level as far as his ability to learn martial arts. And man, Anush, if he wasn't so good at acting, I would tell him, "Man, you have what it takes to be a professional cage fighter, and a good one at that." But man, very, very good actor. So man, stick with that. That's where the real money is. But I remember a few months later, Anuj came up to me and he said, "Sir, I very much appreciate all the knowledge you've conveyed to me, all the grappling. But I was wondering, could you teach me some of those fancy spinning kicks you see in the movies? Do you know any of those? And I was like, heck yes, I do. I'm a third-degree Taekwondo black belt. I'll show you that stuff. So I teach him some tornado kicks and hook kicks and all this stuff. And again, he just picks it up. Picks up those spinning Taekwondo kicks like a fish to water. And he finally reveals to me the whole reason he took the class. Like, he read mixed martial arts, didn't know what that was. He just knew what martial arts was, and so he wanted to learn some martial arts so that he could use some of these techniques in fight choreography for the movies, because he wanted to be an action star. I was like, oh man, wish you would have told me that before. Let's get on it. Let's do some fight choreography here. So, yeah. Again, those lateral spinning Taekwondo kicks work out really well for film, specifically because you don't have to hit each other, and as long as the stuntmen react appropriately, you can sell it. So again, selling the movement, that means making the audience believe that it's real, or at least believable, is the most important thing for fight training. You should check out Nick and Sai. It's a channel, Nick and Sai, N-I-K and A-N-D, Sai, S-I. Okay, go check out their channel. There's some judo guys, awesome judo guys, these brothers who do judo, and they did some work for John Wick 3. They did fight choreography, they trained Halle Berry and Keanu Reeves, they did some stunt work, they had a cameo appearance in the film, and all of that. And what's so interesting about that is that for the longest time, judo and all that entailed, submission fighting, grappling, all those cool throws that you see in the John Wick movies, that didn't exist in movie fu for the longest time. Because again, we have these, what are they called? Unions. Like, everything in Hollywood is unionized. Everything in the acting realm is unionized. They've got the Actors Guild, they've got the union of the guys who carry the microphones around, they have the union of the guys who move the cables. If you do anybody else's job, that's a huge infringement in the movie industry. You just don't do that, right? So they have their guys who do their thing, and it's a very set pattern of how they do the fight choreography. It's what they've done for a long time. It's tradition, it's what's worked, and they don't want to change, right? So it's very unusual for a movie like John Wick, especially like John Wick 3, where they had all these judo movements and suplexes and just beautiful grappling techniques incorporated so seamlessly and beautifully into the fight choreography. Man, I love that so much when they step outside of the box and do away with what has traditionally been done and instead ask what would be better. Okay. So yeah, judo and grappling absolutely can work very well in film. Not all of it, because not everybody recognizes what you're doing. So for example, if you watch a UFC fight with somebody who doesn't know what grappling is, as soon as they start to grapple, they'll say something like, why are they just hugging each other? Why don't they fight? And as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, you're looking at that thinking, no, they're grappling. This is some serious stuff. He's doing this technique and that technique, right? So we need to be trained in the narrative of the movement before we can appreciate the movement. So most of us are already trained in the narrative of, that's a punch to the face, and punches to the face hurt, and they do damage, they knock people out, right? So we recognize that as legitimate fight choreography. Whereas, again, Donnie Yen took a major risk when he made that movie Flashpoint. Oh man, I forgot to mention Flashpoint. Okay, so when was it? Long time ago, like almost 9 years ago. After Donnie Yen made Flashpoint, he got really interested in mixed martial arts, and he wanted to integrate more mixed martial arts movement in his choreography. Flashpoint was probably the first major Chinese martial arts film that featured any mixed martial arts movement. So you watch that, Donnie Yen, he's doing like hip throws and triangle chokes and arm bars, and they're doing Muay Thai techniques, and they're mixing their martial arts. It's not just Chinese Kung Fu. And this was kind of a revolutionary film. And Donnie Yen sent out some members of his fight team, his choreography team, his stuntmen out to different gyms across China, all the gyms across China that taught anything resembling mixed martial arts or jiu-jitsu, and there weren't very many back in that day after he made Flashpoint, to learn more about mixed martial arts. And one of those guys, a guy named Chris, came to my gym and trained with me and told me some fascinating stories about Donnie Yen. And what I love about Donnie Yen is that he is so good at authenticating the movement. So if you watch, for example, Ip Man, Donnie Yen makes Wing Chun look so incredibly cool in that movie. So much cooler than actual Wing Chun in real life, but he makes it look so cool. But man, he follows the form so well. I mean, if you didn't know he was not a major practitioner of Wing Chun, you would probably think he'd been doing it all of his life. And you know, that's the level of study. He's like a method actor for martial arts, which is awesome. So he sent out his stunt team to gather more information, more experience about MMA. And yeah, man, that was so fun training with Chris. And I don't know how much of that information seeped into Donnie Yen's later films, but yeah, that was a great experience. But yeah, Donnie Yen took a great risk doing moves like a triangle choke, for example. Again, most Chinese people weren't trained in the narrative of what a triangle choke is, what it looks like, what it does. They would look at that and think, why does that guy have his legs around that other guy? They might be able to piece it out, like, oh, I guess if you stick your legs around a guy's neck and squeeze really hard, that could do some damage, right? But yeah, think of pro wrestling for a minute. In pro wrestling, they use these usually over-the-top moves. Some of them are legitimate, and some of them are just made up to look fancy, right? But the audience who watches pro wrestling, they are trained in the narrative, right? When Diamond Dallas Page does the Diamond Cutter move, when he goes like that, they're like, oh, he's going to do the move, he's going to do his special move. And then he does the move, and everybody's like, he did the move, that's so cool, right? And every wrestler has their special move that they do, and whether it's a legitimate move that would work in real life or not, the audience is trained to recognize that, this is a move that you respect as being dangerous. Because pro wrestling is about storytelling, it's about narratives. Just like movies. So if you show something in a movie people don't recognize, they haven't heard that story before. Because remember, we communicate in stories, in narratives. Then they're not going to respect that action scene. They're going to think, well, that was weird. That was strange. Okay. Spoiler alert for Avengers Endgame. You guys seen that one? There was a moment in that movie at the end. All right. So Thanos, the big bad guy, and Tony Stark, Iron Man, they square off. Thanos has in his hand the Infinity Gauntlet, well, the one that Iron Man made to put all the gems in, right? And it's made out of Tony Stark's technology, his nanotech that he makes his armor with. But if this is your first Iron Man movie going in, you might not... Sorry, if this is your first Marvel movie, you might not know that. And this might be a very confusing scene. Because Thanos holds up his hand, he's like, I'm going to snap my fingers and get rid of you all, or whatever. And then there's a scene, Tony Stark runs up, puts his hands on the gauntlet, grabs it, Thanos pushes him away and then snaps his fingers, only to see that all of the gems are gone, and they are now on Tony Stark's hand, right? On his armored gauntlet. And the nerds on the internet will say, well, of course, it's nanotech that can reassemble itself. The Infinity Gauntlet was made out of Tony Stark's nanotech, and so he was able to interchange that at will, because that's his technology, that's how it works. They're like a bunch of little robots that work like a... And they'll get super nerdy about that. But if you don't know that going in, you're confused. You're like, oh, wait a minute. How the heck did he get the Infinity Gems? That doesn't make any sense. because they weren't trained in the narrative. That's just a simple example of how that works. So what does that have to do with fight choreography? If you take the time to give your fighting character development, then you can train your audience in the narrative mid-movie. But most Hollywood writers are not that good at writing. You seen that movie, Here Comes the Boom? Somebody asked me about that, and I think I'll do one of my fantastic fictional fight scene things about that. But there was one move, the Kimura, which was kind of set up as being the special move. Not the special move that the hero was going to use to save the day, but rather the special move he needed to defend against. And earlier on in this movie, they established this idea that if the protagonist is being caught in the Kimura, it's a shoulder lock, that if he gripped his hands together hard enough that he could stop this move from making him tap out. Okay. Now, there are a bunch of ways to get past somebody gripping their hands together. It's not the end of the world if you got somebody in a Kimura and you want to finish it and they grip their hands together. It's not the move to stop all moves. It's nothing like that. But, you know, it will certainly slow them down and present the guy on top with an additional problem to solve before he can get that Kimura. But what this movie did well is that it trained the audience in the narrative, hey, this is the Kimura. It's a dangerous move. If somebody does this move on you, you lose the fight unless you defend it. So even if you don't understand the anatomy of a shoulder lock, the audience is trained early on in the narrative. This is what the Kimura is. It's dangerous. You respect that move. And they're also taught this counter. If you grip your hands together and pull your arm in really tight, the guy on top is going to have a hard time finishing that move on you. Okay. Now, that's a very simplistic way of looking at the Kimura. We can make that much, much more complicated if we want to. Watch a John Danaher video, for example, if you want to learn the complexities of the Kimura. But where the movie succeeded, it taught people who don't know anything about jiu-jitsu how to interpret the narrative of the fight choreography. And so in that final scene where Kevin James' character, he's caught in the Kimura, right? And so you see him, he grips his hand together, and the audience is watching like, yeah, grip the hands together. You can stop this move from happening. You can save the day, man. You can shut this down. And he does it, and eventually he manages to shut down that move, right? So without all that foreshadowing, without the character development of the move, if we just skipped ahead to the end of the scene, all the non-jiu-jitsu fans watching that would think, I don't get it. I don't get it. That's the old switcheroo on the Infinity Gauntlet with no explanation of Tony Stark's nanotech armor and how that works. But again, previously in the film, they taught you the narrative. So again, you can make anything work. Anything work. I mean, man, think about Harry Potter. Harry Potter. How many scenes in the Harry Potter movies did they whip out these little wooden sticks and point them at people, and those people were terrified, like, oh, he's pointing a wooden stick at me, ah! But of course, the Harry Potter fans are thinking, no, those aren't just sticks. Those are magical wands, and with those magical wands, you can kill people, you can turn people into frogs, you can cast magical spells that can do horrible things, and that is why they're afraid. Okay? Because they've been taught that narrative. They've been trained in the narrative that this wooden stick is representative of a magic wand with immense cosmic powers. So yeah, man. Take your jiu-jitsu, take your boxing, take your MMA, take all of that stuff. Use that for the movies, but make sure it doesn't just look cool. Make sure it's got a cool story to go with it. You ever seen ballroom dance? Ballroom dance competitions or ballroom dance as a performance art? Not just something that two people do for fun, but as a performance art. Okay. All of the ballroom dance figures are beautiful. They're all elegant. They're all wonderful looking figures. They're fantastic. But there are some really stupid ballroom dance performance choreography numbers out there. There's some terrible ones. So how is it that they can have these beautiful, wonderful, expertly constructed figures and still have stupid choreography? Well, it's all about the narrative behind that. It's all about the meaning behind that. If you put some meaning, if you put some substance behind your cool-looking moves, then it means something. And if you don't, it's just candy. It's just eye candy. That's it. So whenever you make a movie, when you make choreography, when there is purpose, when there is meaning behind the movement, that's where it really starts to get cool. It's why every time they remake Spider-Man, like every other year it seems, and they have his origin story, they always have Spider-Man going out and discovering his powers, like, whoa, I'm really strong, whoa, I can shoot webs or whatever. I can stick to walls, and it's always a big revelation to him. Why did they do that? Well, why do they... not why do they remake the franchise constantly, but why do they show people Spider-Man discovering his powers so you can discover them too at the same time? So you can be like, oh yeah, this guy can stick to walls. Oh yeah, this guy's really strong. Oh yeah, this guy can shoot webs. And there are tons of movies out there with guys who are supposed to be really strong and have powers and all of that, but the ones that are good are the ones that have a good story behind that. So man, there's so many beautiful arts out there that look great on film. Capoeira, Muay Thai. Man, Tony Jaa did a great film where they had a Muay Thai versus Capoeira fight, and oh man, that one was amazing. Visually amazing. Now, I'm not always saying that every fight scene needs to have a ton of substance and story behind it. One of my favorite movies of all time, Jackie Chan's Dragon Fist. It's one of his older films before he became more of a comedic martial artist in film. It was an attempt at a serious kung fu movie. But there's a scene in the middle of the movie that has nothing to do with anything else. There are two characters. It's the only time they appear on film. Just two guys walking down the street. They bump into each other. The other guy's like, hey, what are you doing? Do you want to fight? The other guy's like, yes, let's fight. And then they fight, and it's a great fight scene. And then it's over. We never see them again. No character development. No foreshadowing. It's just cool. And we loved it. So, as long as it's awesome, there's no wrong way to do a fight scene. Thanks for watching. Get out there and train.